Be joining us here in just a moment. And Nathan, before we bring in Dennis, the A10 and that conference and the conference we talked to about all across this country, very much relevant in 2025.
And very much competitive and tough to navigate. But the truth is that he's found a way to do that at Dayton, and we've seen that multiple times, including the recent seasons. And you look back at obviously his resume, and he's been there for a long time too. And I think that's going to be another exciting element to this conversation because you mentioned how many interviews that we've done with coaches and a good mix of into their first year, second year, but we've also had the opposite. We had Bob Buthorn, who had been at USF for quite some time, and getting into his head and figuring out exactly what's kept him around at USF for that length of time, but what's led to their success over that stretch of time. I think all those questions still pertain specifically to this conversation. So I think Dennis is going to give us a lot of good info. I'm looking forward to it.
No question about that. In his 21st season at the helm of the Flyers, Currier has built Dayton into a perennial Atlantic 10 contender. His resume includes 6 conference titles, 6 NCAA tournament appearances, and multiple national rankings, including a program best number 16 in 2022. We're now joined by the head coach of the Dayton Flyers, Dennis Currier. Welcome to Inside the Game.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you stopping on by here on this morning here, and something that we always like to dive into. We've been kind of going back and forth about this. Ryan Glinsky just talked about how Dayton is known for its St. Patrick's Day celebrations. I remember going there as a kid, playing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the annual Dayton Soccer Classic or whatever it's called. I played that every year Memorial Day weekend. But we went to downtown Dayton, and we had there's like a spaghetti factory, if I'm not mistaken, whatever it was called. But we always like to talk about food here. And my first question for you is, what is your favorite place to go eat in the Dayton area, either after a game or just, hey, on a Friday night?
Yeah, I mean, typically I have my home cooked meals for my wife, which are the best. But if we're going to restaurants, there's so many local ones down here on Brown Street, and the Spaghetti Factory is actually one of our choices, especially for the team. So during preseason, I always tell the assistants to get the Spaghetti Factory over here at Dayton. But it's known for so many good places, and there's Flanagan's right down the road. But you have to avoid that during St. Pat's Day because there's probably 10,000 people, small room there.
So
what's your favorite home cooked meal?
My wife does great pasta, but I love seafood because I'm a big fisherman. So she cooks up a lot of the fish that I catch in the summertime. And so redfish and, steamer pots. I mean, I've been a huge fisherman all my life. So, she does a great job cooking those.
Just had salmon recently, but anyways, go ahead, JT. I'm a big seafood guy myself as well.
Oh, yeah. I would definitely agree with that statement as well. Huge seafood fan myself. Hey, so let's dive into college soccer here, Dennis. Obviously at Dayton, A10, it's not considered a Power 5 school, but I know that you have a lot of players that come down and have success there in Dayton. Last year was a phenomenal year for you. You guys had a chance to go the furthest you've ever gone in the NCAA tournament. We saw the likes of Vermont do something similar last year, right? What was the success last year? How did you guys get there? What was the recipe?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things involved with success. And, last year we had a lot of guys that have been with the program. Leadership is so big, and, we had great leaders on the team. But you also had some individual performances. Our right back scored 8 goals, and that's very rare to have that. And I think that one of the statements that was made earlier was that to navigate through the A10, and that's such a great statement because you really do have to navigate through a very unique schedule, and you have to qualify for the A10 tournament, just to get there. So you're playing some unique places, and you have to travel in many different states and many different types of styles of play. Last year, once we lost to Jacksonville, I think it was 3-0. We outshot them, 28-4 or 5. But at that time, you're like, oh man, this could be rough. But then soon after, we beat Indiana on the road, and I think when you get a signature win like that, it gives you confidence. And then from there, we just started to roll. We had so many different guys that can score. So we were extremely dangerous. We played two guys high and wide, and we had the 2 10s that would drop underneath, and so if the center backs followed them, we'd be able to hit the ball, into one of the wingers, and they were very good at 1v1. If they didn't follow them, we could play underneath and possess until we found the outlet out wide. And I just think it was really hard to shut us down. I think we had almost five or six guys that scored 8 goals. And we just started to roll, and we got on a hot streak, and we kept it going, and all the way to the Sweet 16, and it's just an awesome season. But with that, you had several older guys and leaders that were seniors, and they'd been through the program and they've been through the process. And once they do that, they start to really play for the university and understand college soccer and all the ups and downs through it, and that plays a really big role in your success, along with having very talented players. So a lot of those guys went on to to the next level after the season. And it's just a really amazing experience, especially being here for 20 plus years, and seeing the crowds come out, and the administration and the school just getting behind us, and having that experience was really rewarding.
We talk a lot about the dynamics and how things have changed here over the last many years as it relates to the college game, and specifically the men's game as well. And when we talk about like kids growing up and where they want to play, right? If I look back at my high school soccer career, first of all, I don't know if I knew Dayton existed as far as like a school in my mind, right? Obviously, I knew it existed as far as a school, but as a dream, I was like, I want to go play for the University of Michigan, right? Kids growing up in Ohio or like Ohio State, maybe, which by the way, boo to Ohio State, but
yeah, damn straight, boo them.
but maybe there's dreams of other universities, and where does Dayton fit into that as far as the player who's playing right now in the high school environment? And why would they want to pick Dayton as their destination?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's programs that we call them branded programs that when you grow up and you're thinking of Michigan or Ohio State here in Ohio, and I think that's part of building a program is you're trying to brand it, and you have to work a little bit harder when you're a mid-major or you're not in the ACC, and that was started back when I got here, and I think the one word you used was dream. And I've been a huge dreamer. I started dreaming when I was at Harrisstow State College. My first day of coaching, and telling them we're going to go after a national championship, and I think the team had won just 2 games in 3 years. But that's what you have to do. And I was a big dreamer here at Dayton, and trying to brand the program all the way down to our jerseys. They always say, where's Waldo jerseys? And you want to brand your program. Even the style of play, which I think is unique, is we're a very high tempo attacking team. We are nationally ranked in goals scored year in, year out. Not so much this year, but we're working on it. And we want student athletes to understand that playing style can be very important, and trying to let them know about fit. Fit is so important, finding that right program. And yes, we have to work a little bit harder. But, with that being said, when you look at Dayton as a mid-major, I think we're one of 9 schools with MLS draftees over the past 5 years. And, with that, we are located in a fantastic area. We got FC Cincinnati and Columbus Crew. We've got Chicago Fire, Nashville. We've got a couple of regional scouts in this area. So, the guys that have that ambition to play pro, which most of them do, now, because the pro game has evolved and gotten so much bigger since my time, and it's actually a reality, that's a big selling point, from an athletic standpoint, and that you're going to be coming here and getting exposed to the next level. And we also have, the results for it. We have I think right behind me is all the books with the guys that have gone on to play at the next level. So that's a really big thing. And being a really good environment of facilities, and we're an Olympic sport here at Dayton. So, but we have to sell that, because you're exactly right. When you grow up, when I grew up, I was thinking St. Louis University. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if the ADs want me to say this, but when they called me, first off, I thought it was Louisville, and I was at Incarnate Word, and the phone rang, and I saw that Louisville was on the, was looking for a coach, and they left a message, and then I called Ted Kissel and Tim Wobbler back, and they're like, "Yeah, we're from the University of Dayton." I was like, "Oh, where is Dayton?" And when I came on campus, the first thing they did, which was the smartest thing they did, was bring me to the field. And I don't know if you've seen our field, but it's arguably one of the top 5 fields in terms of the venue and the European terrace seating. It's just a really cool environment. So right when I went out there, I could see myself coaching, and I could see myself in that. And it's like, now I just got to get this. I got to get student athletes that maybe don't grow up dreaming about playing at Dayton to come here on our campus and see what it's like. And that's I think for Dayton, that's the brand, along with the playing style, along with the pros that we're consistently, spitting out into the MLS and USL. That's a big piece of what we're trying to get out to those student athletes, and have them, take a look and say, okay, yes, I'm looking at Ohio State, but let me look at Dayton. Let me see this. And we've gotten a lot more, recruiting battles that we probably didn't get into, earlier on in my career.
I was never athletic enough, big enough, strong enough to ever be considered by a Division I program to play a sport. All right, I'm 5'8" on a good day, but one of my favorite things about interviewing coaches is I get that feeling of almost kind of like being a recruit, because I get to hear the entire pitch. Because I'm sure you've made that entire pitch multiple times, time and time again, and you pretty much touched on everything in that last handful of minutes. I mean, environment, community, results, location, everything about Dayton that makes it wonderful. I was curious, because I did want to ask about this specifically, and we were just looking at some of the highlights of you guys against Michigan and the big crowd that was out there. I'm from an area of the country here on the west side of the state of Michigan. I went to a Catholic school growing up, so we've had a lot of friends, a lot of family that have gone to Dayton for school and have been a part of that environment and a part of that community. The one aspect that I wanted to ask you about is school pride and turnout and support for the program, because you're right, at Dayton it just feels different. When you're there, when you're a part of it, there is this overwhelming sense of pride, and a lot of alums still carry that pride even into their life after school. What's that aspect like, the school pride part of being a part of the school and in a program like Dayton?
Yeah, and I think this is tied in together. One of the words you used was community. We're not a commuter school, so everybody lives on campus. So you have all, 9 to 10,000 students that are living on campus. And, the soccer field is actually essentially in the middle of campus, which is even better. So, like you take St. Pat's Day, everybody's walking right past the field, and why not just stop in and take a look? And I also think winning is, it's contagious. It brings excitement and energy. And as we started to win, we knocked off West Virginia 5-1. They're ranked number 1 in the country, and then all of a sudden the crowd starts to really pour in, and they're like, hey, we got to check this out. But there's the pride of the students for all the sports. You look at basketball, it's sold out, even before the season begins. Volleyball has huge crowds. So all the students like to be involved in all the aspects of the university, including athletics. And, it's great to have that. Plus the local area of soccer and their families, they're very involved, and we get out into the community a lot as well. All the sports do. We do a lot of community service and getting out there, and all that part is tied in together for the big crowds. And if you got to see the Michigan game, I mean, not only was the stands packed, but we ran out of seating, so the parking lot also had was completely packed. And
Wow.
there's a very lively environment here on, the weekends and the nights. And, I think people have seen that with St. Patty's celebration. So there was that kind of connected from the field into the housing that all the students live in. We have 452 houses that the juniors and seniors live in. So it was just, it was amazing just to kind of sit where I was and see that support, coming out against Michigan, and then being able to win the game, which was, phenomenal, because, as a coach, you're just so nervous. Here we got all these fans coming out, and, we might
Right.
lose the game. So.
Yeah, I think people like seeing competitive ball too. I think that's the other thing. If you're competitive, if you're always in games, if you're exciting to watch, I think your style of play certainly speaks to people enjoying watching you, and that would certainly be the case for us, because I love everything you were talking about from a play style perspective. That would create a product that is exciting to come out and watch. I wanted to ask you, though, because we have talked about the A10, and obviously you've been at Dayton for a while. Throughout the course of your career, who has given you the most heartburn in terms of another program in the A10? Who's given you the most heartaches in terms of an opponent?
Well, I've always had a tough time losing. I mean, I've always wanted to win. I think when growing up in St. Louis and coaching, for 9 years at Harris Stowe, which is really right across from St. Louis University. And there's a long story about it, but I grew up in admiring St. Louis, and, a couple years into my coaching career, St. Louis joined the conference, so this was a huge ordeal for me, and I think Dayton was 0-12-1 against St. Louis before. So I wanted to make that the rival. This was going to be they're probably going to watch this. We play them Saturday and we, use it for motivation. But that's always been, a special place, because when we travel there and I'm sitting at their bench, I'm looking across, seeing where I started coaching at Harris Stowe State College. And
Wow.
So that's a very, I have to pinch myself doing that, because, that it's a small, historically Black college of, 1,200 students. And knowing I started there, and here I am playing against, St. Louis, is just really amazing. So anytime we lose to them at their place, that's going to hurt a little bit, because a lot of
Yeah.
my family comes out, and all the previous student athletes that I coached are coming out and watching as well. So.
Hey, Coach.
That's awesome.
Ryan here, and I got one question for you. You're entering your 21st season here at Dayton, and what is one thing that has stayed? Actually, one thing that has changed, and one thing that has not changed in your 21 years at Dayton, whether that's a coaching philosophy, a recruiting pitch, the way that you play, what type of player that you're looking at? What is one thing that has changed, and one thing that hasn't changed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the big thing is, because, I started coaching at 21 years old, and so I've been coaching ever since I got out of college. And obviously the game has really evolved. And I think as a coach, you have to evolve as well. I mean, the 1980s motivation still works at times, but you also have to evolve a little bit. So coming, since the start of 2005, coming into Dayton, I don't know if playing style is as important to the student athletes now. Like, that's become a big part. And so we've always been a very high end attacking team, but I think you have to brand that. You have to really show that through your videos, and it is exciting. What's the most exciting thing about soccer is scoring goals. And that's probably the biggest emphasis that's changed, is we have to really hit on this style of play. And because this is where, this is important to student athletes, and that's a really big part of the recruitment, is they want to go to a place. a lot of them want to go to a place where you are building at the back, you are attacking, you are, especially when you're an attacking player. Wide guys, wingers. The wingers that come to Dayton, they're getting onto the ball a lot because we're playing. We're a wide team. We're getting them isolated. We're getting them positions where they can take on guys and score. I think the question of what hasn't changed is. Involvement is very big for a coach, and modernizing yourself and staying up with the trends and understanding the needs of student athletes, and now the house settlement, all this crazy stuff's coming in. But the one thing that won't change, that I've been since the day one, is the intangibles. It is really, really important that these kids go through, understand the intangibles, the work ethic, the leadership, and that the part that they have to go through that process. And the portal does make it a lot easier to remove yourself from the process. And we're always telling guys, you have to get through that process. And if you can get through that process, as you guys probably know, you become a better person, and you are able to take on the next stage of your life, which isn't always pro soccer. It might be something else. So that has been something that's instilled in the program that we will always have, is just making sure they understand that those intangibles are so important, and that work ethic and that fitness, the leadership, all that stuff still, it will always be so important. And really, emphasize to them, like, don't leave the process. Like, a lot of times when things get tough, you're only going to become better if you can get through that. As opposed to leaving it and thinking that it's not going to happen somewhere else. Get through that tough times, because then you will be able to handle adversity and be able to understand how to tackle and find solutions to your problems. And I see that over, and I mean, I've coached for so long, but so many stories of those student athletes being able to get through that process and seeing them grow and develop. Joseph Meltaquia, who was just recently drafted, was a big part of it. Like, he went through some difficult times as a junior, and he stayed here, and he got through that process, and then just absolutely killed it. He's probably one of the best wingers in college soccer last year, as a senior, and then ended up getting drafted in the MLS now. So, that part will always stay the same.
First off, we truly appreciate you stopping on by here this morning and being a part of Inside the Game. We've had a chance to talk to a lot of great coaches and get some great insight as to what makes the college environment so awesome to be a part of, and it's really obviously refreshing to be able to have a chance to listen to what you have to say here this morning. My last question for you is this. We talked about this obviously earlier when I was asking you about dream, and you had talked about your dreams and talking about what your dream is as far as branding Dayton, right? I mean, I would say this isn't an anomaly. We've talked to a lot of coaches who've been at programs for a long time, right? But in a world in which everything's always changing, and people are always coming and saying, hey, I want the next best thing, right? Players are doing that, coaches are doing that, but you found your home in Dayton, and I think that's a really, really cool thing. So my question for you is this. Looking at your entire career and looking at what you've been able to accomplish, what is your single greatest accomplishment as a coach?
That is it would be unfair to me to say one specific thing. My journey has been amazing. I started from the NAIA. I went into Division II, and then I went into Division I. And I think the journey itself, starting from really probably the worst NAIA team in the country at the time, being able to vie for a national title there, going into Division II, and we get into vying for a national title there. Tim Wilder, Ted Kissel called me about Dayton. I told my wife, I said, listen, there was a fear, of going into Division I. I said, just get ready to pack up in 5 years. I think it was a 5-year deal. I was like, because I don't know if we're going to be able to make it here. I'll be moving on. So now here I am, the most tenured coach at Dayton. I really think the accomplishment of the journey and going through and all the trials and tribulations that you go through, the ups and downs of coaching. But I think if you had to pick individual ones, I've always loved championships. Championships, excite myself and schools, and the student athletes create this additional bond that will never be broken. And it's like, you are trying to climb up a mountain every single year. And then, you get close to the summit and it seems like, oh, we're so close. So, it's going to be easy. But that last part of it to get to that peak is so hard to do. And, you have to have so much trust with each other and build bridges over muddy water and just get to that top. And then when you're there, the view is like the best view you've ever seen. And so, it's hard to pick any single accomplishment. I would just say, as a whole, the journey, now that I'm older and you start to reflect, just looking back at where I started and all the trials and tribulations at Harris Stowe and Incarnate Word and then Dayton, has just been amazing. And coming to Dayton, thinking, oh, I don't know if I could do it in Division I. You hear all these stories. I think first time I got hired, I was at a recruiting event, and the coaches didn't know who I was, and I had overheard this guy say, "Who got hired at Dayton?" They're like, "Oh, it's a D2 guy," and they're like, "Oh, well, he's got a rude awakening," and I'm like, "Oh no." So, and here I am 21 years later, and it's just the journey itself has been inspiring, and that's probably the best accomplishment, I guess, is that tenure and doing it for this long, because I never knew I would do it for this long. I never knew I'd get into coaching. So it's like still going here, still hungry, and still enjoy the chase.
Dennis, thank you very much for being a part of us here this morning. The Flyers currently 3-1-5 overall, 2-0-1 in the A-10, and they're looking to have much success here the rest of the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Go